Okay, dokie. We're back. Outlier. Lisa Beeson. Chapter 21. Let's hit it. Chapter 21. Later that evening, as they were all sitting... Sorry. Alright, let's try that again. Later that evening, as they were all sitting around the large dining table finishing up dinner, someone knocked at the door. Cale wiped his mouth with his napkin and got up quickly to answer it. Ari looked through the door before he opened it and nearly choked on the piece of chicken as she was in the middle of swallowing. Outside the door waited a tall, drop-dead gorgeous, bosom red-headed in a curve-hugging, rose-colored sundress, and she was a progeny. Cale opened the door and he greeted her warmly with a big smile. "Helena, it's so good to see you again." Ari relaxed when she saw that Cale knew the progeny, but she had never seen him smile like that before. Helena's face lit up, and she cried out happily, "Lothan Cale, it has been absolutely forever." Lothan? No one calls him Lothan and lives to tell about it. Not only did he let her live, she strutted in like a queen, wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him seductively on both cheeks like she was European, which, judging by her Tennessee accent, she definitely was not. Her bright energy was different than any other progeny Ari had seen before. It spread out around her, like the shade's dark auras, but instead of being ominous and repellent, it was pleasant and attractive, almost like a pheromone that affected everyone around her. She smelled deliciously wonderful, like candied flowers, and Ari could feel herself being pulled into her thrall. Helena was beautiful and amazing, and she felt an irresistible need to be her very best friend. But then she caught herself, blinking hard and shaking her head. What am I doing? I've never met this woman before. Why do I all of a sudden want to be her sycophant? And as though a fog had cleared in her mind, Ari found herself immune to Helena's lure. Looking around, she saw that all the men's pupils were dilated, and they were looking at Helena like she was the best thing in the entire world. Even Cam. Okay, especially Cam, she admitted. "All right, pull it back, temptress." "Well, look at you," Helena gushed at Cale. "You have not aged a day, and I have aged more days than I care to admit." "You look beautiful as always," he said in a placating tone. "You remember Malcolm Reed and Vincent Tober?" He motioned his arms towards them at the table, and they both stood up. Ari leaned over and whispered to Cam, "What's with all the first names? I didn't even know Reed and Tober had first names," she joked. But Cam was too busy staring at Helena like a smitten puppy dog to even respond. "Of course, it's so good to see both of you," Helena said, smiling beautifully at them. "A pleasure," Reed said with a brief wave of his hand. Tober just nodded his head. "And these are my wards, Cam and Ari," Cale said, nodding towards them. Cam had seemed to have lost the ability to speak properly. Hi, yes, Cam," he mumbled incoherently. Helena smiled kindly at him, and then looked over at Ari. "Oh, Lothan, is this her? Come here and let me get a good look at you," she said with her arms outstretched and beckoning Ari over. She really didn't want to, but Cale motioned for her to get up with an impatient flick of his head. So she got up and reluctantly walked over to stand in front of Helena, who now, upon closer inspection, seemed to be about the same age as what Cale looked, and with her heels on, she was actually an inch or so taller than Ari, which was a nice change. As Ari approached, Helena took her measure and seemed to be trying to focus her energy on her. But now that Ari was wise to what she was doing, it only floated around her like smoke against glass. "Nice try, lady. Your witchy ways won't work on me." Realizing she was having no effect on her, Helena looked at her curiously for a second, then pulled her energy back, releasing its hold on the men. This caused Ari to realize that Helena knew exactly how her ability affected other people. Tall and beautiful. Oh, the fun I can have with you, she said, looking at Ari appraisingly, and then turned to Kale. This girl is amazing. I thought you said this was going to be a challenge. Ari's eyes cut over to Kale. Gee, thanks, she retorted, slightly offended. Kale cleared his throat uncomfortably. I said it may be a challenge to make a 13-year-old look like an 18-year-old. That's... I'm not even using his voice. I got so sucked in here. Kale cleared his throat uncomfortably. I said it may be a challenge to make a 13-year-old look like an 18-year-old. That's all. I'll be 14 next week, she countered testily. No matter, Helena dismissed airily. Even without any makeup, she could pull off 15 or 16. So it shouldn't be a problem. Her arms are more toned than I expected, but I can still make it work. She turned and went back out to the little elevator landing and came back holding 2 plastic-covered dresses on hangers and pulling a rolling suitcase. Come with me, darling, she said as she made her way towards Ari's room. It's time for me to work my magic. Ari looked over at Kale worriedly, and he just smirked and gently nudged her towards her awaiting fate. After hours of washing, waxing, plucking, painting, lifting, primping, and making Ari feel like she was being primed for the best show title, Helena finally said she was finished and told Ari to go look at herself in the standing full-length mirror in the corner of the room. Ari was nervous, and not just because she was wearing heels for the first time in her life. Remember, heel, toe. Shift your weight from one hip to the other like a cat, Helena coached, and pretend there's a string attached to the top of your head, pulling you up tall and straight. Ari did as she instructed and slowly made her way over to the mirror. She was shocked at the reflection staring back at her. Helena really did work her magic. She had put Ari in a vintage 1950s style sleeveless black knee-length party dress that gathered at her slim waist and flared out to give the illusion of curves that normally weren't so pronounced. The neckline was high, made of black tulle, and even though it was sleeveless, it still managed to cover the scar and rune on her back. It reminded Ari of something Audrey Hepburn might have worn. It was elegant and classy, yet flirty at the same time. And paired with the heels, it made her long legs look fantastic. Her shiny black hair was pulled up prettily into a stylish updo, accentuating her newly acquired long, graceful neck, which made her think of Cass. She felt naked without all her trinkets, but at least she was able to keep the blue stone pendant on. Helena had told her that Hale wanted her to wear it as a conversational piece, meant to lead Royce into talking about his mother's heirloom. The blue pendant was accented by a pair of sapphire teardrop earrings Helena let her borrow. They would have gone beautifully with her original eye color. The dark brown contacts paired with the makeup Helena used to contour and accentuate her features did the job of making Ari look almost unrecognizable. The way she made her long-lashed eyes look enormous and sultry, and expertly accentuated her lightly blushed high cheekbones and subtly glossed full Cupid's bow lips had an effect that even Ari had to admit was breathtaking. I look beautiful. You're a magician, Helena, Ari breathed, marveling at the transformation. Helena came up behind her and leaned in close, smiling proudly at her creation. I only polished the diamond. Helena had definitely met the goal of making Ari look 18. She could even pass for maybe a young 20. Ari had always been mature beyond her years, but it had been more cerebral than physical. Her appearance might match up more with her mental maturity now, but she still had the innocence of a sheltered 13-year-old. Ari didn't know how to reconcile the different aspects of herself, which left her feeling confused and unsettled. Helena also had an invitation to Royce's benefit and was going to accompany Kale and Ari. She had changed into a silky silver gown, whereas she pulled out all her tricks to make Ari look older than she did. She did everything she could to make herself look younger. As she stood beside Ari in the reflection of the mirror, the contrast between Ari's smooth, dark caramel skin tone and Helena's fair, creamy complexion was stunning. Aren't we a pair? Helena asked with a smile, trying to use her ability on Ari again, to no avail. You don't have to use your ability, Ari said, looking at Helena's natural beauty in the reflection, sensing her kind heart. People will still adore you without it. Helena looked at her strangely, shocked that she knew about her ability, and not sure if Ari was being honest or if she was just affected by her energy. What a horrible ability, Ari thought, never truly knowing if people actually cared for her, or if they were just being manipulated by her energy. It would have been so easy for her to become an evil, manipulative monster, but all Ari felt flowing from her was an incessant need for validation, the need to know she was worth something to somebody, and it almost broke Ari's heart. Your ability doesn't affect me. I'm telling you the truth. She turned and looked her in the eyes so she would believe her words. You are enough, Helena. She stared at her for a second and then looked like she was about to cry. Thank you, darling. That's the nicest thing someone has ever said to me. And she brought Ari in for a tight hug. Now, she said, pulling back, dabbing at her eyes and giving her a dazzling smile. Let's go show you off. She told Ari to stay in the room until she called her out for a more dramatic entrance. And while she walked out, Ari looked through the wall to see the men Ari looked through the wall to see the men talking and hanging out in the living room. Cam and Tober were dressed in all dark clothing. Reed was wearing a chauffeur's uniform, and Cale was standing there in a perfectly tailored and very expensive-looking Armani suit, his hair coiffed just right and looking every bit the handsome billionaire that he was. Helena sashayed out with her gorgeous silver dress flowing like mercury around her curves, and her silky scarlet hair lying beautifully on her porcelain shoulders. And just as Ari predicted, she didn't need to use her temptress powers to command the men's attention and adoration. They all lavished her with compliments, which she accepted gracefully, and then called for Ari to come out. Ari had seen plenty of TV and movies with dramatic makeover reveals, never thinking she would ever actually have one. But here she was. This was her moment, and she was going to have fun with it. She hid the self-conscious, awkward teenager behind her poker face and walked out just how Helena had coached her. Smooth heel-to-toe steps, swaying hips, tall, confident posture, and putting on the air of an entitled socialite. As she came into view, everyone's attention immediately went from Helena to Ari as she sauntered out. Reed and Tober's eyes went wide and their eyebrows shot up, shocked into silence. Cale's face was shuttered and unreadable, and Cam's was a mask of incredulous astonishment with his mouth open in disbelief. She blocked herself from reading any of their attentions, not confident enough in herself to want to know what they were thinking. Cale nodded his head towards Helena. It'll do. Helena looked outraged enough for both of them at his blasé reaction. It'll do? It will more than do, Lothan. She is a work of art. Everyone will be fawning over her. Her words snapped Cam out of his stupor. No! He said, shaking his head and standing up. He pointed at Ari like she was a dog that had just done something wrong. No! Then he turned to Cale, looking at him like he should know better. You cannot take her out of this apartment looking like that. I don't care how old she looks. She's still only a 13-year-old kid. Practically 14, Ari mumbled. Cale looked past him to Reed and Tober. I'm sorry. Was I being loud? I'm sorry, baby. You go, babies. Yeah, it was part of the story. I had to do it. I'm sorry. Mwah. You guys are being so good. Mwah. I love yous. My baby. Okay, but I have to finish this. Hop on down. Oh, you silly. Oh, you silly baby. Yes, mama. Love you, baby mama. Yes, yes. My silly girl. Mwah. Okay, but I'm in the middle of this. Hop on down. Good girl. Careful of your paws. Okay. Cale looked past him to Reed and Tober and flicked his head towards the door, and they both got up. "Come on, lad," Reed said, grabbing the back of Cam's shirt, practically having to drag him out of the apartment. "You can't go out like that, Ari," he said right before Tober closed the door. "I forbid it!" She could hear him continue to yell behind the door. "I need to go get my wrap and put a few touch-ups on my hair and makeup. I'll be right back." Helena excused herself, choosing to ignore Cam's outburst, and walked back into Ari's room. After a moment of awkward silence, Cale cleared his throat. "Cam's not wrong. You are only a child." Her fragile confidence immediately shattered like glass, making her look down at her manicured toes peeking out of the open-toed high heels. "But it's a necessary evil to accomplish what we came here to do," he justified as he came closer to her. "You will be the youngest one there, but you cannot act like it. Tonight you are not Ari. Tonight you are Ariadne Cale, the ward and heir of Lothan Cale, and you must conduct yourself accordingly." She nodded that she understood, while still keeping her eyes down. "Stop doing that," he said impatiently. "What?" she asked, glancing up at him curiously. "Always keeping your eyes down and hanging your head like that, like you're an errant subservient. You have iron blood running through your veins, and that's something to be bloody proud of." He gently grasped her chin between his fingers, making her look into his stern eyes. "You have nothing to be humble about. We are faster, stronger, and smarter than humans. We are gods compared to them. So start acting like it." Helena came back out wearing her wrap and holding a small clutch purse, looking elegant and beautiful. "Ready, my darlings?" The three of them walked outside, and Reed was already waiting for them with the Cadillac. Ari couldn't help grinning and shaking her head at them as he stood there holding the door open for them, like the archetypal chauffeur, and he gave her a conspiratorial wink. Ari sat across from Cale and Helena as the car made its way through Manhattan. It didn't take long for Helena to fall back on old habits. She had Cale's rapt attention, and he was even twirling a lock of her hair around his finger as he whispered something into her ear, his bright energy sparking with attraction wherever they touched. Gross. Ari couldn't take it anymore. She didn't like the way Cale was being manipulated, so she latched onto his energy and pushed the image of what Helena was doing to him into his mind. His eyes became unfocused for a moment, and then he thought to her, "I know perfectly well what she's doing. It's why I'm bringing her along. We need that ability to get the stone. Now get the bloody hell out of my head." Ari broke the connection and stared out the window for the rest of the ride, stubbornly refusing to look at either of them. When they arrived, Reed got out to open the door and helped Helena get out first. As Ari was about to get out next, Cale grabbed her arm and whispered fiercely, "Remember, you're not Ari in there, you're Ariadne. So keep your damn head up and act like you belong." "I get it," she whispered exasperatedly back, and then exited the car as gracefully as she could. Cale got out of the car, buttoned up his suit jacket, and held out his bended arms for Helena and Ari to take. They both threaded their arms through his, and the three of them walked confidently past the doorman into the building towards Royce Kavanaugh's private elevator. They were a force to be reckoned with. Every head in the lobby turned towards them as they walked through. The luxurious atmosphere would have intimidated Ari, but this was par for the course for Ariadne. She was a mask of privileged arrogance Ari could hide behind. A role, too, she could throw herself into for self-preservation. She chose to play Ariadne as a female version of Cale, cool, in control, and above it all. At the doors to the private elevator that led up to the penthouse apartment, they were met by two huge bruiser bodyguard types with earpieces, and one smaller man holding a clipboard. Nice to not have flies buzzing around, and I can actually drink this, an hour after I had my noodles. Helena took out her invitation, and Cale reached into his... Hold on, Bubs. And I'm beautiful. Oh, you're so pretty, baby. What a pretty baby. I love you. My Callie girl. Oh, you're so cutesy, baby. My cutesy baby. That's Callie. And yes, Mama. Hi, Mama. Hi, beautiful. You're so beautiful, baby. I love you. Okay. Helena took out her invitation, and Cale reached into his suit jacket and brought out his and Ari's, and they gave them to the guy with the clipboard. He checked the invitations and went about matching the names to ones on the list. When he found them, he looked back up with a smile and pushed the button behind him. When the doors opened, he ushered them into the deluxe wood-paneled elevator. The ride up seemed to take forever, but they held their pose as a united front. And when the doors opened to Royce Kavanaugh's party, Ari felt like she was transported into something out of The Great Gatsby. This was not how she pictured the cherry benefit to be. The atmosphere had a certain decadent opulence that Ari could only describe as somewhat bacchanalian? Bacchanalian? Whatever that is. It was a small function, with less than 50 of only the creme de la creme of New York's elite in attendance. Hey! Settle down. They had arrived a little bit more than fashionably late, and the revelry was already well underway. The theme seemed to be mostly centered on the casino's aspect of Monte Carlo. Croupier-attended blackjack, craps, baccarat, and roulette tables were scattered about the open first floor, where people played around with vast amounts of money that most could only dream of. Struggling here. An attractive attendee greeted them as they exited the elevator. Welcome, Mr. Cale, Miss Cale, she said like she knew exactly who they were, and Mrs. Devane. Ari latched on to Cale and thought, Mrs. Devane? She's married? She was. Now she's a very rich widow. If you'll please head over to Veronica, the attendee said, pointing towards another attractive woman standing behind a temporary cashier cage off to the side. There's a $10,000 minimum donation. Everything the house makes will be donated to Mr. Kavanaugh's charity to help feed and shelter the city's unfortunate. Cale nodded, barely registering her presence as they moved towards the cashier cage, where he and Helena made out their donations. Ari had to hide her reaction to the staggering amount of money being frivolously thrown around. Behind Ariadne's detached apathy. Helena reached out her energy, making everyone in their vicinity aware of their arrival. Then Cale grabbed flutes of champagne for himself and Helena from a passing server. Do your thing, girl, he mumbled to Ari as they walked deeper into the penthouse. The residence was almost... Gosh, I'm struggling. The residence was mostly comprised of marble, glass, and steel. The west side of the apartment was just one big wall of glass window panes, giving everyone a gorgeous view of Central Park and the skyline beyond. The rest of the first floor had large floor-to-ceiling windows, showing off an almost 360-degree view of the area around the building. Cale and Helena had started mingling, while Ari, acting like she was already bored, pushed out her field of awareness, trying to find the stone, and hoping Royce didn't have it stashed away in a safety deposit box in a bank somewhere. Sensing the stone was proving to be difficult, the stones didn't put off as much energy as living beings, and it was hard to pretend to be listening to Cale introduce her. Hey! It was hard to pretend to be listening to Cale introduce her to people as she waded through all the energies moving about the place. It wasn't on the first floor, or the second. So she pushed out even further until she finally felt like she found it on the 3rd floor. Geez, how many floors does this place have? Once latched onto it, she knew it was definitely the stone. Just as she was about to tell Cale, none other than Royce Kavanaugh himself came up to them, with an almost empty glass of bourbon in his hand, followed by his equally buzzed entourage. He was in his late 20s, about the same height as Ari in heels, and looked like the quintessential New York playboy, with the aplomb of someone accustomed to always getting what he wants. "Alana, I'm glad you could make it." "Oh, you know I wouldn't miss one of your soirees, Royce," she said, going in for one of her hugs and a kiss on each cheek. When she drew back, she turned towards Cale. "I don't believe you've met Lothan Cale yet." Royce's eyes widened slightly when he heard Cale's name. "Ah, the mysterious Lothan Cale," he mused while taking in his measure. Royce was a good 3 or 4 inches shorter than Cale, and nowhere near his belt. So instead of trying to exert a sense of power by intimidation, Royce went with flattery. "It's good to finally meet you face to face, and I must say you do not disappoint. Coming in here with a gorgeous lady on each arm. You are a very fortunate man, my friend," he said while ardently shaking Cale's hand. His eyes swept over to Ari, and she felt his attraction and lust flow over her so uncomfortably. It was becoming difficult to keep up her mask of apathy and not cringe. "And who is this beautiful creature?" he said, coming over to Ari. He saw his eyes glance down to the blue pendant, and she noticed the quick flicker of recognition in his eyes. Cale put a possessive arm around her back before saying, "This is Ariadne, my warden heir." "It's an absolute pleasure to meet you, Ariadne," Royce said as he took her hand in his and kissed it as if he was bestowing some kind of special honor on her. "I'm sure it is," she said coolly with a condescending smirk, and a momentary look of shock and indignation came over his face that was priceless. He wasn't accustomed to a woman not being in the least bit interested in him. But, like a spoiled child that always wants what he can't have, the challenge only made her more enticing. He let out an amused bark of laughter and gave her a wink. "Oh, I like you." Then he spread out his arms towards the gambling tables, saying, "Take your pick and have fun. It's all for charity." Then he whispered in one of his entourage's ears and smoothly detached Ari away from Cale as his lackey distracted him and Helena by leading them towards the roulette. "I was just on my way to play some scraps. I was just on my way to play some craps. Would you care to join me?" Royce said, placing his hand on her lower back, leading her in the direction of the craps tables. Ari looked back uncertainly over her shoulder towards Cale, wanting to tell him about the stone. But Royce continued to crowd her and usher her away. "Don't worry, beautiful. You don't have to be under his thumb all night. I'll take care of you," he said, trying to sound reassuring, but Ari sensed his lecherous desires behind his words. She wanted to break the hand that was subtly making its way down her back, but that probably wouldn't be the best choice at the moment, since everyone was looking at them and moving out of their way as they found a place around the craps table. After Royce traded some cash for a large stack of chips from the boxman, who seemed to be in charge of the money and the bets, he gave her half of his stack, then leaned in and whispered into her ear, "Have you ever played before?" She shook her head no, as she tried to observe what everyone was doing. He explained the basics of how to play the game, the odds against the house for the different rolls, and how and when to place the different bets. While standing uncomfortably close and continuing to whisper in her ear, even though she was distracted by the feel of his energy practically crackling against her, she figured out the probabilities of the game pretty quickly, and which were the smartest and most lucrative bets to make. When the current shooter sevened out, Royce walked over to take his turn. The stickman gave him his choice of dice from the 5 he lined up in front of him on the table. Royce picked out the pair he wanted to use, and everyone placed their bets either for or against his odds of rolling a 7 or an 11 on his come-out roll. He grinned at Ari and told her to come over and stand by him. "You can be my lucky lady," he said with a wink. Ari rolled her eyes and reluctantly came over to stand by him at the end of the table. and then made a bet and played the odds against him. She quickly found this was called playing the dark side, as her bets made everyone look at her like she had two heads, and couldn't help but pick up on the term from several people's whispers. He picked up the dice with one hand, then tossed them towards the other end of the table, where they bounced off the little rubber pyramids, protrusions meant to deter cheating. The dice came up as 2 threes. The stickman called out, "Hard 6!" and then corralled the dice with the curved end of his stick and brought them back to Royce. Now, as Ari understood it, Royce had to roll another 6 before he rolled a 7 or 11. Everyone at the table placed their bets. Ari purposely made horrible bets. Royce looked over at her like she was being dumb, asking, "Are you sure you want to do that?" That's nice. Oh. Here, maybe if I... There we go. Oop. That works. Royce looked over at her like she was being dumb, asking, "Are you sure you want to do that?" To which she just smiled and nodded back. It didn't matter to her whether she lost Royce's money. He had plenty, and it was going to people who actually needed it, so it made her feel a bit like Robin Hood. He rolled 3 more times before he got another 6, and made everyone who bet wisely a lot of money. Royce beamed over at Ari. "See, I told you you'd be lucky," and kissed her on the cheek. She had to stop herself from elbowing him in the solar plexus. Instead, she just bet against him again. "I might start taking offense to that," he said, trying to sound flippant, but she could hear the truth behind it. "Just playing the odds," she said with a flirty smile, making doe eyes at him. He took a drink of bourbon and tossed out the next come-out roll, and the dice came up snake eyes. "2 craps, 2, Stickman called, which meant everyone lost their past bets except for Ari, who doubled her money. Royce's eyes cut over to her, and she just shrugged airily. The stickman brought back the dice, and Royce tossed out another come-out roll, and he rolled a 3 and a 4. "Winner 7, Stickman called out, and everyone cheered, even Ari, who was finding herself caught up in the fun. Then, in celebration, Royce put his hand on the back of her head and kissed her full on the mouth, smashing his lips against hers and tasting of alcohol. She pushed him off and walked angrily away, as she thought, "You're so lucky that's all I did." She was so pissed that her first kiss was stolen away by that entitled jerk. He left the table and came after her. "Ariadne!" She didn't want to make a scene, so she stopped at the bottom of the staircase to the second floor and turned back to him. But she didn't hold back the fury in her eyes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that," he apologized in a hushed tone. "No, you shouldn't have," she fumed, lowering her voice as well. "You might be able to pull that kind of crap with other chicks, but not with me. I don't care who you are. I decide who can kiss me. Understand?" "I understand. I was wrong." He was hanging his head like a mischievous little boy, and then he saw his eyes. Gosh, can't talk. I can't talk. No, I can't. I can't make the words come out of my mouth. Hi, beautiful. "I understand. I was wrong," he said, hanging his head like a mischievous little boy. And then she saw his eyes dart to her pendant. "Look, let me make it up to you. I have a necklace with a ruby that has writing on it just like yours," he said, pointing to the writing that was etched on it. "Would you like to see it?" She was annoyed at the fact that he thought she was the type of girl who'd be distracted by something shiny. But since this was exactly the opportunity she was waiting for, she let it go. "Fine," she sighed, like she couldn't care either way. "Excellent. It's upstairs. Follow me," he said as he started up the stainless steel steps. A bunch of red flags went up in Ari's mind at the fact she was going upstairs with a strange guy. But Kale needed the stone, and he had trained her to take care of herself, so she figured she should be fine. The second floor was mostly taken up by the kitchen and dining room, a small sitting area, and a couple guest bedrooms. Royce went into the kitchen and made himself another drink. "What's your poison, milady?" he asked with a sly grin. "I'll just have water, please." "Are you sure?" Ari nodded resolutely. "As you wish," he said with a slight bow, then got out a ridiculously overpriced bottle of water and poured it into a glass for her. "Here you are." She took the glass and held it in her hand. "So where's this necklace you wanted to show me?" "Patience, beautiful," he said after taking a healthy gulp of his drink. "You stay here. I'll be right back with it." He went up a second set of steps that led up to the third floor. Ari took a sip of water and then put it down on the counter as she looked around. In the sitting area, she noticed a marble chess set sitting on a small table by the window. She went over to the window to look out to the roof of the building across the street, where Cam and Tober were supposed to be staked out in case things got squirrely. They were doing a really good job of staying hidden. She gave up trying to find them when she felt the stone's pull coming closer, and turned to see Royce coming towards her with the necklace. "Do you play chess?" he asked, glancing towards the set. "Every now and then. Do you?" "Not in a long time. It's my father's set. He taught me how when I was a kid, and we play every once in a while," he said in a far-off way. Ari remembered Cale telling her that both his parents had died in a plane crash. She felt a twinge of pity for him. Then he came back to the present and held up the necklace for her. "See this large ruby in the middle?" he said, pointing to it. The way the stone was set in the necklace, you couldn't see the writing from the front. He turned the necklace over and showed her the etched symbols. "The symbols are like the ones on your pendant. When I saw that, I just knew they must have come from the same place. This necklace has been in my mother's family for generations, but no one has ever worn it because there was a rumor it was cursed." Ari raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Really? Do you believe that?" He shrugged. "It might just be strange coincidence, but anyone who wore the blood rubies either died or wished they had," he said dramatically. "The story goes that my great-great-grandfather bought it from a jeweler, who claimed he got it from the son of a Venetian merchant, who had got it from an English sailor, who had taken it from a Barbary pirate." "It's quite a provenance," Ari said with an amused chuckle. "Oh, it gets better," he said with a grin. "The pirate had gotten it from a Dutch merchant ship, whose captain had the necklace made from the rubies he had procured from bandits, who had stolen them from the tomb of a man who was said to be half man, half jinni." "Half man, half jinni?" Ari asked, outwardly skeptical. But she knew that jinni was the Arabian word for the mythical beings the Europeans called genies. She figured that the man had probably been a progeny. "Yeah, it's nonsense. But due to the fact that there were a bunch of unfortunate accidents associated with the rubies, people figured the strange writing must have been a curse written by the Jinni man, and that it was activated once they were taken from the tomb. Anyone who was stupid enough to wear them was supposedly doomed to a horrible fate." "Why did your family keep it if they thought it was cursed?" "Greed," he said simply, "and the bragging rights of having a necklace of cursed rubies. As long as nobody wore it, everything was fine." "Then why did you let your girlfriend wear it? I saw the pictures online." "I didn't let her do anything. I made the mistake of leaving her alone with it for a couple minutes. That's all on her," he said, throwing his hands up like he wanted nothing to do with it. "I had told her the backstory, but the dumb broad put it on anyway. I'm not usually a superstitious person, but as soon as I saw those pictures she posted, I dumped her ass and wished her luck. I don't want that kind of bad juju around me," he said, shaking his head. He looked down at her blue pendant. "What about that one? Has it brought you any bad luck?" Ari held the stone in her hand and looked at it contemplatively. Ever since she found it in that box she bought from Adelina's, Her life had certainly taken some major unfortunate turns, but that had more to do with who she was rather than having anything to do with the stone. The only thing the stone had done was bring her in contact with Kale, which in retrospect was pretty fortunate. The only bad luck I've had since wearing this was caused by me, she said honestly. Lothan would be very interested in buying the necklace from you. He's an avid collector of jewels like these, and he'd be willing to pay you a very high sum for it. Royce sighed. As enticing as that is, unfortunately I can't sell it. My cold, spiteful mother put a clause in her will forbidding me from selling off any of her family heirlooms. If I do, then my sizable inheritance from her side of the family is forfeited. Well, that certainly puts a kink in things. What's the deal with you and Lothan Kale anyway? How did you become his ward and heir? He asked while trying to mimic Kale's accent. He took me in when I became an orphan. He took me in when I became an orphan. I owe a lot to him, she said in a tone that told him she didn't appreciate his mocking attitude. Royce immediately looked contrite, feeling a kindred pain in their loss. Sorry. My mother and I were never close, but I loved my dad. It's hard to lose your parents, he commiserated. He raised his glass to their memory and then downed the rest of his drink. Ari nodded, and then arbitrarily looked around the room in hopes of trying to keep herself from looking down at her feet. Her eyes swept back towards the marble chess set, and she got an idea. So, the will says you can't sell the necklace. But what if I want it off of you? She asked, motioning towards the table and giving him her best flirty smile. He looked back and forth between Ari and the chess set, enamored with her and intoxicated enough to be intrigued by the proposition. You want me to gamble away a priceless family heirloom by playing you in a game of chess? He placed his empty glass on the table and then grinned. You're lucky I'm drunk enough to take you up on that. If you win, you can have the blood rubies. But if I win, I get your pendant. Fair is fair. Ari was confident she would win, so she pretended to think it over for a second, then said, Deal, and they shook on it. $42? This chapter has been that long? Boy, I guess has been. Sheesh. Cam was supposed to be scanning the area around the building for potential threats, but his eyes were continuously drawn to what was happening between Ari and Royce on the second floor of the penthouse. He looked down through the windows on the first floor at Kale playing craps with Helena, and everyone gathered around them, cheering him on. And he couldn't help wondering out loud, what's Kale doing? He saw her go upstairs with that creepy a-hole. Why isn't he storming up there and beating him to a pulp? Cam was still furious the guy had kissed her. Because he's busy keeping everyone's attention away from the fact that the host has gone upstairs with Ari, Tober whispered back while looking through the scope of his rifle. Well, why the hell is it okay that Ari is alone with that skeevy pervert? He's already assaulted her once, Cam fumed. Because she's capable of taking care of herself, and she's doing exactly what they went there for, getting that bloody stone away from that skeevy pervert. Cam conceded he had a point, but it didn't mean he had to like it. He was still really pissed at Kale for turning his sweet innocent pipes into that stunning femme fatale strutting around in there. His confused feelings were causing his protective instincts to go into overdrive. If he my words, they're not doing. I go back. That way. There we go. If he lays another hand on her, I'm shooting him between the eyes, he warned. No, you won't, Tober said definitively, because I'd beat you to it. Royce chose to play the black pieces, abdicating that ladies should go first. So Ari sat down on the side with the white pieces and made the first move. She let him rule the board, while putting up just enough of a fight to make it feel like an authentic win. She figured she'd let him win the first game, knowing Royce's ego wouldn't like being beaten right off the bat, and he'd probably back out of the deal. When he put her king in check, he grinned as he sat back triumphantly. Checkmate! Hand it over, beautiful. She put on a show of pouting as she lifted the silver chain up and over her head, and reluctantly placed the pendant in his waiting hand. As soon as he placed it on the table beside the ruby necklace, she said, Okay, how about another game? If I win, I get both necklaces. And if you win, you can keep them with no hard feelings. And I'll walk away quietly. She tried to put on her most pitiful puppy dog eyes to play on his sympathies. He smirked and narrowed his eyes. Why would I agree to that when I already have both necklaces? And frankly, I don't want you to walk away. We need to sweeten the deal for me. If I win, I keep the necklaces, and I get a willing and consensual kiss, he said while eyeing her lips hungrily. She knew he wanted more than just a kiss. Creep. Since there was no chance he was actually going to win, she agreed to the deal, saying, And no hard feelings if I win? No hard feelings, he promised, and they shook on it. After they shook on it, Royce rubbed his hands together eagerly, already anticipating his reward. Not today, buddy. She moved out her pawn and proceeded to beat him in 7 moves. It could have been less, but she didn't want to destroy him too quickly, at the risk of him getting upset. She latched onto Kale's energy and thought, I got it. Can you get up here, please? She had to touch both stones. If she had to touch both stones, they'd start glowing, and that would be a little hard to explain away. I'm coming, he thought back, and she could feel him moving towards the stairs before she broke the connection. Royce sat there looking at the board in shock. Did you just hustle me? Yes. No, she said, shaking her head and trying to look as innocent as possible. I just got lucky, I guess, she quipped, while giving him doe eyes and a flirty smile. Don't look at me like that unless you're willing to back it up, he warned, and then he slid the necklaces across the table towards her. A deal is a deal. I'm a man of my word. No hard feelings. She took hold of the silver chain, careful not to touch the stones, and put it back around her neck where it belonged. Though it would be nice if I could get that kiss as a consolation prize, he mused silkily as he leaned forward and gave her a predatory gaze. She's underage, Royce, Kale said in a deep, stern voice, full of strength and authority. Royce jumped up and stepped away from the table, looking like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. What? He stuttered, startled by Kale's sudden and overwhelming presence. We were just playing a game of chess for my mother's necklace. Then he realized what Kale had just said and looked at Ari accusingly. Wait, underage? How old are you? She stood up, looking at him apologetically. You really don't want to know, but let's just say very underage. I'll pay you for the necklace, Kale said, reaching into his suit jacket. No, she won it fair and square. I'm glad to be rid of the damn thing anyway, he assured him, while stepping further away from the table. I need to get back to my guests, if you'll excuse me. And then he quickly walked away and down the stairs, probably not wanting anything to do with a reputation-damaging lawsuit from a man who could afford the same caliber lawyers as he could. As soon as he was out of sight, Arya picked up the necklace from the table, causing her blue stone and the middle rectangular ruby to shine with a brilliant inner glow. She looked at Kale, and a smile spread across her face. We did it, Kale! You have a full set! She was barely able to contain the excitement bubbling up inside her for him. After almost 70 years, he was finally able to go home. He strode over and picked her up in a bone-crushing hug. You did it, my wonderful girl. he whispered in her ear. Thank you. She hugged him back just as fiercely, relishing his praise and gratitude. When he let her go, he carefully took the necklace from her hand, like he was afraid to break it, and put it in an inside pocket of his jacket. We better leave before Royce decides to kick us out, he said with a smirk. Yes, please, she said, nodding her head. She was only too eager to get away from this whole escapade. And that was the very long chapter, chapter 21. Look, we're almost done. Ah! Alrighty. But that is a long video, so we will call it good. Thank you for joining us with chapter 21. Peace.